Chapter 1. The Cyborg Outcast. The Galactic station known as Epsilon Gate was a wonder of engineering, a place where beings from across the galaxy mingled, traded, and sometimes clashed. It was a bustling haven for traders, mercenaries, scientists, and wanderers alike. But even amidst the crowd, Inara stood apart. Born with a rare degenerative disease on her home planet, Inara was one of the few beings to survive extensive cybernetic enhancements, a last-ditch attempt by doctors to save her life. However, the cost was great. Her organic body was altered beyond recognition. Her left arm, parts of her torso, and even half her face had been replaced by sleek, silver-plated machinery, leaving her half organic, half machine. The residents of Epsilon Gate viewed her with a mix of fear and curiosity. To many, she was a symbol of the blurred line between organic life and machinery, a reminder of how fragile biological life could be. Parents whispered to their children to steer clear of her. Merchants watched her with suspicious eyes, as if she might suddenly malfunction and wreak havoc. Some even regarded her as a cursed Soleil hybrid, neither truly alive nor completely mechanical. Inara moved through the crowded halls in silence, her footsteps echoing off the metal floor. She worked as a repair technician, patching up broken systems deep in the bowels of the station where few dared to venture. Most days, her interactions were limited to quick exchanges with supervisors or other workers, but they rarely lasted more than a few words. Even here, in a place known for accepting all walks of life, Inara was an outsider. Her enhancements gave her strength far beyond that of the average organic being, yet she carried herself with a quiet dignity, moving with a grace that seemed almost unnatural for someone with her modifications. But inside, she was worn down by the constant isolation, the stares, and the whispers. She longed for a connection, someone who might look beyond the metal and see her for who she was. But after years on the station, she had long given up on such hopes. One day, while working on a malfunctioning electrical panel near the station's quieter residential sectors, Inara sensed someone watching her. She turned, her mechanical eye adjusting to focus on a tall figure standing just a few paces away. He was human, with rugged features and dark hair that looked like it had seen its share of interstellar winds. He wore a casual, worn leather jacket, the kind favored by independent explorers and traders, and his gaze was steady but curious. "Need any help?" he asked, his voice surprisingly warm. Inara blinked, a rare moment of surprise flashing in her organic eye. She was used to stares, but no one had approached her willingly in years, much less offered assistance. She shook her head, her voice coming out a little colder than intended. "I've got it covered." He didn't take the hint to leave, instead kneeling beside her as she resumed working on the panel. "I'm Jason," he said, holding out a hand. Reluctantly, she accepted it, her metal fingers wrapping around his organic ones. She expected him to flinch, as most did when they touched her cold, unfeeling cybernetics, but he held her hand firmly, a small smile playing on his lips. "Inara," she replied, surprised at how natural her name sounded in his voice. Jason seemed to have an unusual aura of openness about him. Where others saw a monster, he saw someone intriguing. He peppered her with questions about the work she did, the intricacies of her cybernetic enhancements, and even about her life on Epsilon Gate. At first, Inara answered reluctantly, keeping her responses short and guarded. But there was something about Jason's genuine curiosity and lack of judgment that made her want to keep talking. As they spoke, she learned that he was an explorer, a drifter who traveled from system to system. He had no affiliations with any galactic faction and was more interested in learning about different cultures and technologies than amassing wealth or status. His fascination with her was a mystery, even to him. But he was drawn to the strength in her voice, the hint of vulnerability in her gaze, and the way she moved with quiet resilience despite the cold stares of those around her. When their conversation ended, Inara felt a strange pang of regret as Jason finally rose to leave. She had grown accustomed to her isolation, yet somehow, this brief interaction left her feeling even lonelier than before. As he walked away, she watched him until he disappeared into the crowd, half wishing she had allowed herself to say a bit more, to hold on to the warmth of his presence just a little longer. In the days that followed, Jason continued to show up wherever Inara happened to be working. He asked about her projects, her cybernetic upgrades, and even her interests outside of work. Their conversations grew longer and more personal, though Inara still found herself holding back. She was afraid to let him too close, afraid that he would see her as the others did, a half-life, part human and part machine, and something to be feared. One evening, as she worked late in a quiet corridor, Jason found her again. He sat beside her as she adjusted the wiring in a control panel, watching her with the same relaxed expression she had come to recognize. They shared stories of their lives, of moments when they each had felt like outcasts. Jason told her about his early years on Earth, feeling like he never quite fit in, especially after he had left to explore the galaxy. Inara, in turn, shared fragments of her own story, how she had once been a bright, curious child before her illness and surgeries turned her into something other. Their conversations stirred something in her, a sense of belonging she had long forgotten. She found herself looking forward to their encounters. The way his presence made her feel less alien, less alone. And though she didn't fully understand why, she found herself wanting to trust him, to let down the walls she had spent years building. However, unknown to either of them, a group of beings had been observing their interactions. This group, part of a galactic organization known as the Order of the Pure, had a strict belief in preserving the purity of organic life. They viewed cybernetic beings like Inara as aberrations, corruptions that blurred the line between life and machine. To them, Jason's acceptance of her was not just a risk but a threat, one that could inspire others to question the natural order. As Inara and Jason's bond deepened, the Order decided that action needed to be taken. They marked Jason as a target, a dangerous influence that needed to be silenced, and Inara as a mistake that should never have existed. In this chapter, we set the stage for Inara and Jason's connection, a delicate bond born out of shared loneliness and curiosity. Their unlikely friendship has begun to challenge the prejudices around them, even drawing the attention of a dangerous faction. The stage is set for conflict, as their deepening bond threatens to expose hidden prejudices and put both of their lives in peril. Chapter 2. The Human Connection. Jason's daily visits to Inara became a ritual on Epsilon Gate, one she quickly grew to anticipate with a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. She wasn't used to companionship. For years, she had lived in silence, hiding her dreams, her fears, and even the small quirks that made her feel more human. But with Jason, she found herself beginning to share pieces of herself that she had long buried. They met at odd hours, often in the quieter wings of the station, where she worked late repairing malfunctioning systems. Each time he approached, he brought with him a spark of energy, a warmth that brightened even the dimly lit maintenance tunnels. One evening, after finishing a repair job, Inara and Jason found a quiet alcove overlooking the vastness of space. The galaxy stretched out before them in a brilliant sea of stars, and for a while, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the distant lights. "Do you ever feel trapped here?" Jason asked, breaking the silence, his gaze shifting from the stars to Inara. "Like, no matter where you go on this station, you're still stuck?" Inara considered his question. "At first, I thought it was just the nature of the station, so much metal, so many confined spaces. But it's more than that. It's the way people look at me, like I don't belong." Jason nodded, his eyes soft with understanding. "I felt that too. Earth wasn't exactly home for me, and I thought space might be different. But I guess loneliness follows you wherever you go." Their shared words of isolation settled between them, forging a bond that transcended the boundaries of flesh and metal. Jason's presence was unlike anything Inara had ever known. He didn't flinch at her metallic exterior or question her humanity. Instead, he treated her with a warmth that left her both unsettled and longing for more. Their conversations grew deeper over time, touching on topics that felt both intimate and forbidden. They spoke about the line between organic and machine, the stigma attached to cybernetic beings, and the ethics of altering one's body in the pursuit of survival. Jason was fascinated by Inara's perspective, seeing her as someone who had chosen life against all odds, adapting to a world that had otherwise left her behind. For Inara, this was the first time she could share her thoughts openly, without fear of judgment. She felt lighter in his presence, as if the weight of her cybernetics had been lifted, even if only for a few moments. But while their bond grew, a shadow loomed over them. The Order of the Pure, the clandestine faction that opposed all forms of artificial life, had begun watching them closely. Their influence stretched across multiple systems, and Epsilon Gate was one of their strongholds. For them, Inara was an abomination, a living affront to the purity of organic life. And Jason's acceptance of her was a dangerous precedent, one that threatened to undermine their beliefs. One night, as Inara and Jason were walking back from a maintenance job, they noticed that the usual hum of the station was unusually silent. The corridors were empty, and even the ambient chatter of distant voices was absent. Jason's instincts kicked in, his gaze flicking over their surroundings with a wary alertness that Inara hadn't seen before. "We're being followed," he whispered, a hint of tension creeping into his voice. Inara's mechanical sensors confirmed his suspicion. She could detect faint heat signatures moving through the shadows, silent but unmistakable. The Order of the Pure was closing in on them. Jason grabbed her hand, leading her into a side passageway. They darted through narrow corridors and winding tunnels, their footsteps muffled by the thick, metallic floors. Inara's enhanced vision helped them navigate the dark, and Jason's quick thinking kept them one step ahead of their pursuers. But the Order's agents were relentless, tracking their every move with precision. In a desperate bid to escape, Jason led them to a cargo bay near the edge of the station. The room was filled with crates and equipment, providing temporary cover, but they knew it wouldn't be enough to evade the Order for long. Jason turned to Inara, his expression serious. "We need to get off this station. They're not going to stop until they get to us." "But I don't have anywhere else to go," she replied, her voice betraying a mix of fear and confusion. "Epsilon Gate has been my home." "Home doesn't mean much if it's trying to kill you," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "Trust me. We'll find somewhere safe, somewhere they can't reach us." His words were a lifeline, a promise she desperately wanted to believe. Despite her fear, she nodded, her gaze steady as she took his hand. Together, they made their way to Jason's ship, a modest yet reliable craft docked at one of the quieter ports. As they boarded, Inara felt a pang of loss, realizing that she was leaving behind everything familiar, even the parts of Epsilon Gate she had called her own. But with Jason by her side, she felt a flicker of hope, a sense of possibility that had eluded her for so long. Moments after they took off, the Order's agents arrived at the docking bay, watching in frustration as the ship disappeared into the blackness of space. They would not give up easily. Inara and Jason were now fugitives, hunted across the stars for daring to defy the Order's vision of purity. During the journey, Inara's fear slowly transformed into resolve. She found solace in Jason's presence, a grounding force that reminded her of her own strength. She had survived unimaginable trials to become who she was: survivor, a fighter. And now, with Jason by her side, she would face whatever challenges lay ahead. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive, not just existing on the fringes of society, but choosing her own path. And while she didn't know what the future held, she knew one thing for certain. She would fight for her right to live, for her right to be seen as more than a machine. Their escape took them to the edge of known space, a region filled with abandoned planets and forgotten star systems. Jason guided them to Nexus 14, a planet rumored to be home to ancient ruins from a lost civilization. It was a desolate world, its surface littered with relics of a society that had vanished millennia ago. As they landed, the sight of the ruins struck Inara with a strange sense of familiarity. She had never been here before, yet something about the place felt right, as if it were calling to her. The crumbling structures, covered in alien script and symbols, seemed to resonate with her very being. They disembarked, stepping onto the barren surface, the air thick with silence and mystery. Jason took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Together, they ventured into the ruins, unaware that the secrets hidden within would change their lives forever. In the shadows of Nexus 14, as they delved deeper into the ancient relics, a new chapter of their journey was about to unfold. One that would test not only their courage but their connection and the future they dared to dream. This chapter dives into the budding connection between Inara and Jason while building tension with the arrival of the Order of the Pure, a faction dead set against their union. Their flight from Epsilon Gate and arrival on Nexus 14 set the stage for a deeper exploration of Inara's identity, as well as a confrontation that could redefine the galaxy's views on cybernetic beings. Chapter 3, Bound by Danger. The air on Nexus 14 was thick and stale, saturated with the scent of age-old dust and the whispers of a civilization long gone. Jason and Inara walked through the desolate ruins, their footsteps echoing against the cracked stone floors as they ventured deeper into the ancient city. The structures around them seemed alive, as if watching their every move, and Inara couldn't shake the strange sensation that she was connected to this place. The silence between them was heavy, but it wasn't an uncomfortable one. Jason kept his gaze alert, his hand brushing against the blaster at his side, ready for any potential threats. Inara, on the other hand, was lost in thought, her mechanical eye whirring softly as she scanned the surroundings, her sensors detecting energy pulses emanating from within the ruins. Finally, she broke the silence. "Do you think these ruins belong to others like me?" Jason glanced over, curiosity sparking in his eyes. "You mean cyborgs?" Inara nodded, her gaze distant. "Maybe not exactly like me, but beings who were a mix of organic and machine. This place feels familiar, somehow, as if it's speaking to a part of me I don't fully understand." They continued deeper into the city until they arrived at a massive structure in the center of the ruins, a towering temple-like building with intricate carvings and patterns that glowed faintly as they approached. Jason studied the symbols, his fingers tracing the strange patterns etched into the stone. "These markings, they almost look like a language," he said, tilting his head as he examined them. "But nothing I've seen in any galactic database." Inara stepped closer, her cybernetic hand hovering over the symbols. The moment her metal fingertips touched the stone, a pulse of energy surged through the ground, lighting up the carvings along the walls in a brilliant wave of blue light. She pulled her hand back, startled, as the entire structure came to life, its dormant systems awakening after centuries of silence. "Inara, what did you do?" Jason whispered, his voice filled with awe. "I don't know," she replied, her gaze fixed on the glowing walls. "It's like it responded to me." The ground beneath them rumbled, and a door slid open at the far end of the room, revealing a staircase leading into the depths of the structure. Inara felt an inexplicable pull toward it, as if someone was calling her. Jason placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We don't have to go down there if you're not comfortable." But Inara shook her head, determination sparking in her eyes. "No, I want to know. I need to know what this place is and why it feels like it's part of me." With a nod, Jason followed her as they descended the staircase, their surroundings growing darker and colder the deeper they went. The passage finally opened into a vast chamber, illuminated by a central console covered in more glowing symbols. In the center of the room was a large, crystalline pod, suspended in midair by beams of light. Inara approached the pod, her heart pounding with anticipation. Within the pod lay a sleek, silver suit of armor, unlike anything she had ever seen. It shimmered with a strange energy, its design both mechanical and organic, as if it had been crafted with both metal and living tissue. This is a cyborg prototype," she breathed, her hand hovering over the glass. It was designed to merge organic life with technology at a fundamental level, to create something beyond either. Jason stared at her, a mixture of awe and concern in his gaze. Is this something you would want?" Inara hesitated, torn between the allure of the armor and the fear of losing herself. The suit was calling to her, promising a sense of belonging she had never felt. But what would it mean for her identity? Would she still be herself, or would the armor change her, make her something other? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise echoing from the staircase. The sound of heavy footsteps reverberated through the chamber, and both Inara and Jason turned to see members of the Order of the Pure descending, their weapons drawn and their expressions grim. "There's no place for you here, abomination," one of the agents sneered, his eyes narrowing at Inara. "You and your companion have gone too far. This place is sacred, meant to be untouched by corrupted beings like yourself." Jason stepped forward, his jaw set in defiance. "She has every right to be here, just as much as any of you. This isn't your temple, and you don't get to decide who belongs and who doesn't." The agent sneered, raising his weapon. "You speak boldly for an organic fool, but both of you will be purged from this place, along with your tainted machinery." In a flash, Jason drew his blaster, and a fierce firefight erupted in the chamber. Inara activated her internal defenses, her cybernetic arm transforming into a shield that deflected incoming shots. Jason moved with practiced precision, his movements fluid and calculated as he took down one agent after another, protecting Inara as they fought back. But their enemies were relentless, and more agents flooded into the chamber, overwhelming them with sheer numbers. In the chaos, Inara found herself backed against the crystalline pod, her hand brushing against the surface. The pod glowed in response, and a surge of energy shot through her, filling her with a newfound strength. She made a decision in that moment, driven by a fierce resolve to survive and protect the bond she had found with Jason. Placing her hand firmly on the pod, she felt the armor begin to merge with her, its energy fusing with her existing cybernetics. The suit wrapped around her, transforming her body into a seamless blend of organic and machine, enhancing her abilities to a level she had never imagined. With her newfound power, Inara charged forward, her movements faster and stronger than before. She cut through the agents with precision, her every action guided by the armor's advanced systems. Jason fought by her side, matching her pace, and together, they drove back the Order's forces. When the last agent fell, the chamber was silent once more, save for the hum of the armor as it integrated fully with Inara's systems. She looked at Jason, her gaze fierce yet vulnerable, unsure of what he would think of her new form. But Jason's expression was one of admiration and pride. "You're incredible," he said, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "I don't care what they say, you're more than they'll ever be. More than just machine, and more than human." Inara felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of belonging she had never felt before. For the first time, she felt whole, no longer torn between her organic and mechanical sides. The armor hadn't changed her. It had amplified what was already within her, making her stronger and more complete. But their moment of victory was cut short as Jason's communicator crackled to life, a warning from the station authorities. The Order of the Pure had sent reinforcements, and they were on their way to Nexus 14. "We need to leave," Jason said, glancing around the chamber. "They won't stop coming, not until they've destroyed everything here. And us." Inara nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then let's give them something to remember." Together, they made their way back to Jason's ship, fighting off waves of enemies who pursued them through the ruins. As they boarded the ship, Inara activated the armor's built-in systems, setting the ancient ruins to self-destruct. If the Order wanted to destroy her, she would deny them the very thing they sought to protect. As they took off, the ruins behind them erupted in a brilliant explosion, the ancient structures crumbling into dust. Inara and Jason watched from the safety of their ship, a sense of closure settling over them. They had survived, and in doing so, had defied the Order's narrow vision of purity. But their journey was far from over. Together, they would face the galaxy, challenging the beliefs that had kept them apart and fighting for a future where both organic and machine could coexist. Chapter 4. The Choice of Humanity. The ship hurtled through space, leaving Nexus 14 and the destruction of the ancient ruins far behind. Inara leaned against the control panel, her new armor humming softly as it continued to merge with her cybernetics. She felt a strange duality within herself, her organic heart beating in rhythm with the electronic pulses of the armor, her mind processing thoughts faster, sharper, yet still entirely her own. Jason sat beside her, piloting the ship, occasionally glancing her way as if to reassure himself that she was still there, still her. "So, how does it feel?" he asked, breaking the silence, his tone light but his eyes serious. Inara considered the question, flexing her hands and feeling the way the armor responded as if it were an extension of her own body. "Strange," she admitted, a slight smile tugging at her lips. "But right. It's like I've finally accepted both parts of myself, and they've accepted each other." Jason nodded, a glint of admiration in his gaze. "I think it suits you. You're stronger than you realize, Inara. You always have been." She felt a warmth spread through her, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the need to brush off the compliment. Instead, she allowed herself to bask in his words, letting them settle in her mind as a reminder of her own worth. But their moment of peace was short-lived. The ship's alert system flashed red, signaling an incoming transmission. Jason pressed a button, and a holographic figure appeared on the console. It was a high-ranking officer of the Order of the Pure, clad in ceremonial armor, his expression one of cold disdain. Cyborg and human, the officer sneered, his voice a mixture of contempt and fury. Your reckless destruction of sacred ruins has proven your disregard for the sanctity of organic life. You are a danger to our society, and we will not allow you to continue spreading your corruption. Inara clenched her fists, her mechanical fingers curling tightly. The only thing corrupt here is your refusal to accept those who are different. You claim to protect life, but you're willing to destroy anyone who doesn't fit your definition of purity. The officer's expression didn't waver. You are not life. You are a mockery of it. And this human who defends you, he is either foolish or as tainted as you. Jason's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. You think you can dictate what life is, but all you're doing is spreading hate and fear. Inara is more alive than any of you who hide behind your twisted ideals. The officer's gaze shifted, his expression calculating. If you truly believe that, then prove it. Surrender yourself, and we will judge you fairly, without interference from that. Abomination. Jason and Inara exchanged a look, understanding passing between them. They both knew this wasn't a real offer. The Order had no intention of showing mercy. But they also knew that fleeing was no longer an option. This was their moment to make a stand, not just for themselves, but for everyone who had been marginalized by the Order's dogma. Inara squared her shoulders, her resolve hardening. We're not running, she declared, her voice steady. We're not hiding. If you want to judge us, we'll face you. But we won't face you alone. Jason's lips curved into a slight smile, admiration evident in his gaze. Together, then? Together, she agreed, feeling a surge of strength at his side. As the transmission cut off, Jason set the ship on a course to a nearby neutral station where various factions would be present. If they were going to confront the Order, they needed witnesses, people who would see the truth of the Order's intentions and judge for themselves. They would expose the Order's hypocrisy and stand as a testament to the unity of organic and machine. They arrived at the neutral station hours later, docking amid a crowd of curious onlookers. The Order's ships arrived shortly after, surrounding the station with their intimidating fleet. The officer who had contacted them earlier emerged, flanked by a team of heavily armed guards. As Jason and Inara stepped forward, the crowd murmured, eyes shifting between the duo and the stern figures of the Order. The officer raised his voice, addressing the crowd. Behold the abomination that threatens the sanctity of organic life. A cyborg, a creature who has forsaken the purity of flesh to become a twisted machine. Inara's voice rang out, clear and unwavering. You call me an abomination, but it was my choice to survive, to live as I am. My existence doesn't threaten yours. The only threat here is your refusal to accept the diversity of life. Jason stepped beside her, his gaze fierce. And this so-called Order would rather eradicate than coexist. They tried to kill us because we dared to defy them. They won't stop until anyone who doesn't fit their standards is gone. The crowd stirred, their whispers growing louder. Some looked at the Order with newfound suspicion, others with anger. The officer's expression darkened as he realized he was losing the support of the crowd. His gaze turned cold, his patience clearly worn thin. Enough, he snarled, signaling his guards to move forward. If you will not surrender peacefully, then we will cleanse this station of your corruption. The guards advanced, their weapons trained on Inara and Jason. But before they could fire, several members of the crowd stepped forward, blocking their path. An alien merchant raised his voice, directing his words at the officer. She has done nothing wrong. If she wants to live, who are you to deny her that right? A scientist spoke up, her voice trembling but determined. I've studied cybernetics all my life. Her existence is not a crime, it's a miracle. She's a bridge between worlds. One by one, more beings joined, their voices rising in defiance against the Order. The officer's face contorted with anger, but he was outnumbered, and the crowd's unity against him grew stronger with every passing moment. Jason looked at Inara, a smile of pride on his face. Looks like we're not alone after all. Inara's eyes softened, a glimmer of hope filling her heart. For the first time, She saw a future where she wasn't just a lone cyborg fighting for survival, but part of a galaxy willing to embrace diversity and unity. But the Order's officer wasn't finished. With a furious shout, he raised his weapon, aiming directly at Inara. In that split second, Jason moved, shielding her with his body, but Inara reacted faster. Her armor, sensing the threat, activated an energy shield, deflecting the shot with a brilliant flash of light. The crowd gasped, their admiration for Inara growing as they witnessed her courage and resilience. Realizing he was defeated, the officer withdrew, his guards following him back to their ship under a storm of boos and jeers from the crowd. The Order had been exposed, their hypocrisy laid bare, and their influence weakened. As the Order's ships retreated, Inara and Jason stood together, surrounded by people who looked at them not with fear or disdain, but with respect and acceptance. Inara felt a weight lift from her heart, the years of isolation and rejection melting away in the warmth of the crowd's support. Jason turned to her, his smile soft but filled with pride. "You did it, Inara. You showed them who you really are." She looked back at him, her voice barely a whisper. "We did it, Jason. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you." Their hands found each other, fingers intertwining as they stood amidst the crowd, a testament to the bond they had forged against all odds. Inara knew there were challenges ahead, that the Order wouldn't give up so easily, but with Jason by her side and the support of those willing to accept her, she felt ready to face whatever came next. Together, they had not only survived, they had won the right to exist, to be seen, and to live in a galaxy that was learning to embrace differences. And for the first time in her life, Inara felt truly whole, her humanity and her machinery in harmony, with Jason as her anchor, her partner, and her hope.